Good afternoon. Welcome to Speaking in Your Basement, where I will be speaking in my basement. You can speak in your car, your basement, any place you can get some privacy, any place you can get by yourself where you can focus in for a few minutes and develop your speaking skills. Now, today we're going to be looking at a question. How do you set goals as a speaker to both inspire yourself, but also get yourself a practical sense of excitement, motivation about what can happen today, not just what might happen in a year or 5 years down the line, but what can happen today? How can you move forward a little bit today? I've done lots of goal setting programs, and I'll speak about some specific experiences with those in the future, but one thing in particular I want to point out today, a lot of them focus primarily on what I call a stretch goal. I've heard it also called the BHAG, the Big Hairy Audacious Goal. Having that big goal, that goal that really gets you thinking about, wow, is that possible? Could I even do that? Can I accomplish that? Having that goal, it's something that stretches you even when you're just considering it. Just considering that goal makes you think, wow, what would I have to do? What would my life look like? How would things have to be different for me to get there, for me to achieve that? That's a good practice. That's very useful. In addition to that, it's very good to have what I call the practical goal, sort of like the daily practice, or sometimes it could be several times a week. And I encourage you to get a daily practice if you're speaking, if you're serious about it. But even if it's 3 times a week will absolutely help you develop your skills and build momentum. That building momentum is a huge key. I read Napoleon Hill the first time years back, and I'd heard people talking about Napoleon Hill for a long time before that. And I kept getting exposed to this idea of a burning desire. You've got to have a burning desire. When you really develop that burning desire, then you know, then you're there, then you're most of the way there already. It's just, cultivating that burning desire was like one of the core elements of getting to a big goal. And I kept telling myself, I was doing all right most of the time while I was goal setting. One of the first ones or most important ones would be financial. I want to make a lot more money. I want a much better job, whatever it was. But I never felt like I really had the burning desire, and all I knew to do was to try to want it harder, which I found out later is not the right way to go. And I don't know exactly what Napoleon Hill would say to this. I don't know. I haven't read all of this stuff. I've just read Think and Grow Rich and bits and pieces of other things. And from that, it's, there's visualization exercises. There's a lot of things you've probably heard about or been exposed to somewhere or another. And I'm not saying that stuff isn't useful. I think it is useful. But what has really worked for me to develop burning desire doesn't even seem like the right thing. There is a site, I haven't been there in years, but called AppSumo. And I think other people have used this term before, but I first heard it on AppSumo. It's, are you an entrepreneur or a wantrepreneur? And I have to confess, most of the time I've been a wantrepreneur. But what that really means for me now is that wanting things isn't really how you do it, or at least wanting things in the typical sense. Like, it seems like it'd be a good thing. I wish I had it. Maybe I could goal set. Maybe I could visualize. It's not to say don't do that stuff. It's to say that's actually secondary stuff. If you really are interested in something, and interested is a better word, because want implies like you understand it, you get it, and you just want it. Well, really, a lot of the things we want aren't things that we really understand. We understand it in some vague sense. I understand what it is to have money, so I think I understand what it is to have more money. But of course, there's levels to that. And there's things that come along with more money. There's responsibilities that come along with more money, including the increased work that is usually required to get to the more money. What really develops something like desire? To me, it doesn't even feel like desire, because I'm so used to calling that wanting and wishing desire, and that doesn't feel like it at all to me anymore. What I think Napoleon Hill was talking about was momentum. When you start taking action, and I would say too many people make it about you got to take big, massive, dramatic action. I think action is much more heroic when it's consistent. If you have the best, most impressive killer workout today and you're floored for multiple days or a week before you can work out again, Well, you probably went a little too hard today. If you're really wanting to develop your body, whether we're talking about becoming an athlete, bodybuilding, or just looking more attractive or getting stronger, whatever else it is, whatever it might be for you, trying to do an epic workout today is probably not the right approach. Now, absolutely, in a few months or certainly within a year, you could be doing something epic on a regular basis, or at least what would look epic to you from the standpoint of now. But if you try to do that the first day, more often than not, you crash. And that's certainly been my experience. I've seen tons of people that had their big next workout plan, and then I talked to them a couple weeks later, and they either weren't working out at all, or they were doing something else. They'd moved on to another plan. They hadn't given it time to build momentum. And the way you build momentum is you start small and you build up from there. But you start small and get consistent. So to talk to our purpose here, if you want to practice speaking for 5 minutes a day, that's fine. And you can go as little as 1 minute. I encourage you towards the 5, but hey, if 1 minute is what you've got, do 1 minute. If you can get through that, consistently, that's where you're going to start to build that momentum. And you may not feel a ton of momentum the first few times you try. Usually there's always a good feeling right after you do it, like, I did it. And then you get them to do it the next time, I did it. And then after a while, the I did it doesn't feel quite the same anymore, but it feels like something's there. There's not really a better term I have for it than there's something there. It's like something's happening. It's like you've set something in motion. And what it looks like to me now, having done this a few times in a few different areas of my life, it's like you've set something in motion, and if you keep it going, it's not going to give you that initial, yes, did it, feeling as big at least as it did initially. But something else is happening. You're building the momentum. It's becoming a part of your life. And there's a satisfaction in this, and I misunderstood satisfaction before too. I thought it meant you're just satisfied and you're kind of done. Like, I'm satisfied with this area of my life. I can move on to something else. There is that sort of satisfaction. But there's also a satisfaction with that building momentum. You've added something into your life. It's meaningful. It's interesting. You want to keep it being a part of your life, and you might potentially want it to be an even bigger part of your life. There's a satisfaction in that. And so if you keep moving, if you keep going, if you get this basic practice started, then there's going to be that sense of momentum. And it's not going to be profound at first, but you'll start to sense it usually within the first week or two. You'll start to sense like there's something else going on. If you can stick with it and keep going, not only your skills, you're going to get better. Even if you had no speaking instruction whatsoever, all you did was practice speaking every day, you're going to get better. But there's plenty of speaking instruction out there. There's Toastmasters, there's books, there's video courses, there's all kinds of things out there that you can practice with, that you can study to get better at speaking. There's all the great speakers of history that you can study to get better at speaking. And with all that out there, I'd absolutely encourage you to at least look into some of it. But more important than that, if you do too much of that in advance, then you're just going to make a mess. You're going to get too many overlapping maps in your head, and it's going to make it harder to move forward. If you just get taking that simple step forward and taking it consistently, and then add on top of that any of the additional information, any of the other experts or the great speakers of history or the great books about speaking or whatever else is out there. There's a lot of good material out there. If you add that in, once you're building that momentum, you're unstoppable. You will build something truly profound in your life. Really bigger than any of the results you can get with speaking. And there's a lot of cool things you can do with being a better speaker. But just that satisfaction of knowing you built a habit and a process in your life from the ground up, and you stuck with it. You stayed in there until it was something that almost had a life of its own, until you didn't feel like you had to practice anymore. You felt off if you didn't practice. If you didn't get some speaking in the day, there's feeling like, what happened? Something's not right. There's something like an incompleteness to the day. And particularly when you have something very simple like a 5-minute practice you can fall back on, You can always go, like if you add whatever else you add on in the future, if you get a very elaborate practice that you're being consistent with, and you have a day where you run out of time, well, you can still get your 5 minutes in. If you're about to go to bed, even if you're super tired, you can do 5 minutes. You can read from a great speaker for 5 minutes. You can read one of your favorite motivational or personal development authors out loud, or leadership, or whatever else you're into. Read whatever informational author at all you're interested in. Read it out loud. Do that for 5 minutes. It's a very easy practice. You can do it virtually anywhere. Any place you can find some time to yourself. You might have other people that appreciate doing it. If you have kids, sometimes they appreciate you reading, even if it's not reading a kid's story or something else. There's something to hearing human voice that is powerful. And so while it's very satisfying to read, it's also very enjoyable to be read to, particularly when it's someone you care about. So that's not a bad way to build out your practice, to just have 5 minutes of reading out loud every day. Lots of other things you can do, and it's not hugely important at the start that you worry too much about it beyond get the time in. Get your practice in today. So if you haven't done it already, find some time for your practice today. That's what I call the practical goal for speaking. Practicing every day, at least 3 times a week. But if you can get in every day, get in every day. Build that momentum. Build it a little bit faster. There's a great deal we're going to cover in the future. We're going to get into some stories and some things that hopefully you find them entertaining. A lot of it, I'm hoping you'll find it useful. But there's not much more profound I can tell you than getting in the practical goal of practicing every day. Now I see this for just about everything, but particularly for our purpose here, for speaking, if you can get in daily practice, you're already well on your way. I don't know if you're halfway there, or 75% there, or 90% there. I'm not certain. But you are well on your way if you will choose to practice speaking every day for the rest of your life. I'm Ben Langley. Thanks very much for spending some time with me today. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. We'll talk again soon.